Welcome everybody to episode 34 of the Hideout. Wow, we're getting real close to a year's worth of these things. Really excited to be here. Thank you everyone joining. I know a lot of people watch this on the recorded version, so I appreciate all of those of you who made it live, but also to everyone who's watching later. Thank you for checking out what we've got to offer. Today we are going to have an awesome panel with a couple of really interesting projects that are doing some different stuff on the space. As always, today's space will be about Web3 gaming and the Metaverse. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick Frontera. I am the CEO and co-founder of Apollo Entertainment, the company behind Satoshiverse. If you're not familiar with Satoshiverse, I've pinned a tweet that kind of goes through everything, but we are a blockchain-enabled superhero universe, started in the comic space and have now been building an entire 3D universe with our core project being our Satoshi's Legions game. So won't talk too much about that today, maybe a little bit later, but check it out if you don't already know. But what I'd love to focus on are our two amazing panelists today. What we'll do is we'll do some quick introductions into yourselves, what you're building, and then Spencer will take us into the questions. So let's start with Mike. Mike, could you introduce yourself and your project?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michael Rubinelli. I'm the Chief Gaming Officer at Toronto Studios, and we have many games in development. The kind of the most notable one to date is a game called Blockchain Brawlers, which is a real different approach on kind of the play-to-own space. Then we've got a couple of games in soft launch or kind of closed alphas. One's called Music Mogul, which is a really interesting kind of music, fantasy, build your roster, build your label tycoon style game. And then the other is called Spin Tycoon, which is sort of a Coin Master inspired casino game where you build your own version of Las Vegas. You put some slot machines down, but instead of spinning the slot machines and getting chips or coins back, you actually get troops out that you use to attack other players. And then you use those, you get troops out to attack those other players, and then you raid their currencies and you keep hold of them for a little while. And that's what we're doing.
Amazing. Well, excited to have you on, learn more, and get into all this stuff. Let's go to Adam. I think it's Adam at Euphorica.
Hey, Nick. Great to be here. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I'm Adam. I'm the COO. I'm one of the three co-founders here at Euphorica. And what we're building and innovating on is game engine technology. I'm really using IP to bring a Web2 audience into the Web3 world. The game that we're building is a mashup of kind of Pokemon, Super Mario, Smash Brothers, racing on hoverboards. And I guess one of the topics we're talking to today about is the comics and how we utilize that to bring that Web2 audience into the Web3 world. So, yep.
I love it. Well, yeah, definitely keen on getting into that as we are taking a very similar approach with comics and lore and translating that into gaming. So very, very excited to get into all this. Spencer, why don't you give us a quick introduction and then take us in? I'm not hearing Spencer. I wonder if maybe that's something that I'm doing wrong. Let's see. Spencer, if you're, I'll get us started, but why don't you jump out and then jump back in if you can hear us? So I guess to start, we'll jump right in with a question for everybody. So, what aspects of a game do you believe should live on-chain versus off-chain? So that's the question. I guess the context is a little bit. We talk a lot about on-chain gaming, and there's this kind of concept of fully on-chain gaming. But, at least in my experience and what I've seen a lot of projects doing is a much more hybrid approach where certain aspects of the game live on-chain and then a lot of the game, lives off-chain, and there's this kind of hybridization. And so I'll kind of give my thoughts last on this one just from what we're building. But I'd love to hear kind of your guys' thoughts on, how much of this stuff needs to be on chain? What are the important things that should be on chain? We could start with, why don't we start with Mike, and then we will go to Adam.
Yeah, so I'll speak for kind of our approach, our thoughts, and we're at a little bit of an advantage. We utilize the Wax blockchain, which has a time to finality of kind of less than 3 minutes on the way down to less than 3 seconds, which is going to feel very much like a native kind of Web2, kind of gamer experience. I bought something, oh, now I have it, I can use it, and that's kind of a real feel-good moment for us. The thing that we've discovered, the thing that we understand or appreciate is that, the typical kind of, mass market consumer expectation is, when I buy something, I want to be able to utilize it right away. I don't want to wait. I don't want a cooling down period. I don't want any of these things. And so the more that you have that happen throughout your product, kind of the worse user experience it is, right? And there's only so much, pain and suffering and poor user experiences that consumers are going to kind of sit through. And so we really made a very intentional kind of approach of, if you're playing a game, it should feel like a game, right? There should be a game database. There should be a game-related backend. Latency shouldn't be a concern. Transactional speed and velocity shouldn't be a concern. It should be very much instantaneous. Like, it should feel very much like a native Web2 product. But look, Web3 and the blockchain is very important, but it's important from a transactional standpoint. And so when you build a product and you want to be able to kind of segment certain pieces that need a kind of a blockchain verification layer or a trustless and openless and permissionless kind of, validation, like, that's fine, but you really do need to pick and choose your spots, and you should never have it really get in the way of gameplay. And so I don't want to sort of say, oh, this is, kind of where you use it very specifically. I would just say, as a general rule, when you have a game experience, understand kind of what that user journey looks like. And, where is it okay for them to kind of wait for something to happen versus, not needing or wanting to wait. And yeah, so we actually have everything kind of deposited inside of the game from the wallet, and players use it and play it. And when they're ready to sell, transact, trade, give away, what have you, then we have the ability to kind of bulk export those items with, a singular click. And it feels really good. And it feels like that's a great kind of user experience or use case in our experience.
Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything Mike said. I think it comes back to what blockchain was built for, and that's the transparency and openness. And I think the key to that is around things like player attributes, item ownership, and gaming rules. And I think one of the things that we're innovating on is user-generated content. So we are building the tool sets live in the game environment, where when you look at other platforms, even both in Web2 and Web3, typically what you do is you create your content outside of that platform, and then you kind of like cook and bring it into the platform for users to see. The way that we're doing that is that those tool sets are live in the game environment. What happens is, once you've built your assets, much similar to what Mike was saying, you create an NFT tag, and at a certain point in time, those assets then, at the time and place of the user choosing, can go onto the blockchain. But all it comes back to is that trustless environment and transparency.
I totally agree. And I'm actually going to pause the question real quick, because we have our third guest here, Metropolis Origins. So could you guys just give us a quick introduction of yourselves, what you're building, and then I'll get you caught up on the question that we're discussing.
Great. Thank you. I'm sorry for being late. I'm not our normal social media front end. So there was some extra codes to get to log in. We are Metropolis Origins. We're a collectible card game on the blockchain with our own unique spin on collectible card game gameplay. We run a bit faster. We run a bit punchier. We are set in a cyberpunk universe that I'll elaborate on presently. And we're also announcing our forthcoming sort of next phase, which is called Metropolis Worlds, which will allow other IPs to import their cards into our game platform, so that basically all collectible card games can play against one another regardless of their IP in this common space that we're calling Metropolis Worlds. And I am Austin Grossman. I do game design and story for QXR, and I'm a longtime game industry regular. Worked on Deus Ex, System Shock, Dishonored, doing story and game design variously.
Amazing. Well, happy to have you here. Glad you could jump in and get past all of the Twitter barriers to entry that they like to set up. So I'm happy you made it in.
Thank you.
The question we were discussing was kind of this interplay between kind of the game experience and things being on chain. So which aspects and components of a Web3 enabled game should be on chain, and we were talking about kind of the hybridization approach that I think everyone here is taking, at least everyone on this panel. And I guess I was going to talk a little bit about, I guess I'll kind of give my thoughts, and then I'd love to hear yours. So our approach is very similar, I think, to what the two that we just heard with Blockchain Brawlers and Euphorica, in that right now we're on testnet, so we're testing a lot of our blockchain capabilities. But the way we're thinking of evolving it is kind of almost the more of a Web 2.5 type of experience, where the vast majority of transactions and well, not even transactions, interactions within the game will likely occur on a fairly centralized server and will be, just happen within the game. And then when you get to those crucial moments where ownership matters, right? Property rights matter. The things that Web3 really does, that is, I think, the opportunity to have that offloading experience. And I think what we're trying to do, kind of being, aware that there is, that our origins are a more crypto native crowd, but then wanting to expand to a, much more crypto non-native crowd and do some of this onboarding and really focus on the benefits of what Web3 offers from an ownership standpoint. We're kind of backing into that approach. So we've started very blockchain native, where, essentially you have all of the functions of the game occurring, during a run, but then anytime you need to do something on the blockchain, you're using our web dApp. And I don't think that is the UX that we want for the future, but it will allow essentially a blockchain native experience if someone wants that. And so now we're working with companies like Hyperplay, which for example is a really, I think, innovative solution to bringing a lot of this functionality in engine. So if you're building an Unreal or Unity on an EVM compatible network, I think it's really, that we've seen major strides to kind of improve that UX in terms of doing blockchain functions in game and back-ending a lot of it. But it still needs some work. And so you do have blockchains like Wax, which have really focused on that. And I think that's a really good option if you're not necessarily going like the full multi-chain EVM route. And even if you are, I think Wax is working on a lot of really important stuff in terms of recognizing that the blockchain native crowd kind of lives in certain pockets right now. And so I think it's an interesting balance, as Mike was saying, between kind of keeping these origins, at least for us, our origins being so, blockchain native, but also thinking about how this expands and how we really educate, I think, as well, on the benefits of blockchain ownership. Because I think, your casual gamer, at least, I grew up playing RPGs and really spending tons of time playing the game. It's not until something goes wrong that you really realize that you don't own anything in those games, and they could be taken away at a moment's notice. If you want to try to sell it, that's when you start to realize that it's all very, closed system contained. And I think that is such a obvious benefit of blockchain that's just completely overlooked right now by the Web2 gaming industry, that, you really have to, I think we really have to do a better job of, as Web3 enabled projects, of saying, look, guys, this is the future if you want it, but it's only going to happen if you want it, right? And I think that's important, because if we don't do that, it's easy to make a Web2 game, right? It's easy to control everything as a project. So, it's interesting, and I think this is an interesting question for that reason. Would love to hear your thoughts on it, Austin.
Well, you know what? You said my thoughts, generally speaking, better than I could. And I'm not our Web3 strategist, but psychologically we tap into that sense of ownership. People own their Magic the Gathering cards and their baseball cards, and it's exactly like you said. They don't own their in-game assets currently, and this is a way for them to do that, to own them forever. And I think that's really, really powerful. And the more we can seamlessly tap into that psychology and and make the apparatus of Web3 less visible, the more we're going to explode out into the regular gaming audience.
Yeah, and I think trading card games are like the unique prototype for explaining the value prop, right? Because trading card games, originated in physical form, and then that was translated to digital form, but they were missing the ownership layer. And I think that not owning your Magic the Gathering arena or online cards was a really like front of mind thing. I grew up playing Magic the Gathering, so I never really got that into the Magic the Gathering online because it wasn't that experience of collecting and owning. And part of the fun in trading card games isn't just playing them. It's the collector experience. And so, it's interesting because I think we're not developing a trading card game right now, but I do think that trading card game companies and the companies creating trading card games in the Web3 space have the best opportunity from an education standpoint of closing that gap and helping collectors and consumers understand what is the real value prop here. So definitely interesting perspective there.
So can you guys hear me?
Yes, I was going to say, Spencer, let's you on. Give us a quick introduction for those who don't know you, and then we can keep going with the questions.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Spencer Vogel. So I've been working with Apollo and Satoshiverse for the last couple of years on the business development and strategy side of things. I'm also co-host of the Comics and Crypto podcast, which is a podcast focusing on the collectible space, both digital and physical. And I'll be hosting. So thank you, Nick, for leading us off while I had some technical difficulties in the beginning there. So we're going to move into some individual questions here. And before we do that, though, I just want to let everybody know that we do a giveaway every single week. So make sure you stick around to the end of the space if you're listening live to make sure that you can enter and win that giveaway. We have 3 different prizes that we're going to be giving away later today. So the first individual question is to Michael. So I'm curious, what learnings have you applied to blockchain brawlers from your years of experience and leadership with Web2 gaming companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the thing that we always took from a blockchain brawler standpoint was that the gaming experience ultimately mattered, right? And it wasn't just like, and people are like, wow, this is great for a blockchain game. And, that's all well and good, but, there's only 45 million blockchain gamers in the world. It's an unbelievably small audience, and it's not actually a super interesting audience, candidly, right? But what is interesting is the 3.2 billion hardcore gamers or core gamers that are out there, and a lot of them are on mobile and they play games every single day and they play them because they're fun. And yet they want to sell the things that they bought and they want to trade and give to their friends. So a lot of the things that they've exhibited over the last 30 years are very much at the core of what kind of Web3 gaming is all about, which is what I love about the space. It's just absolutely where kind of the world is going to go in my mind, without question. That's why I left kind of standard gaming to come into Web3. But the thing that we think about is, when we were building brawlers, we thought, we don't compete with, any of the other Web3 games. We compete with every game. And it's not just every game. We compete with everybody's streaming service and everybody's MP3 player and everybody's desire to go out and do other things. It's all about validating people's use of their time with your product, which is a really big and kind of a, ostentatious kind of goal, right? It's, if you spend time with what I built, I'm going to validate your use of your free time because that's your most valuable commodity. So that's how we always positioned it kind of in the core gaming world and in Web3 as well. You can't just be good amongst other blockchain games. You have to be good amongst every entertainment experience. And so as you use that as your North Star, the fulcrum around kind of your decision making, it really helps give you clarity around kind of what you're doing and when you're doing it. And there's a saying that we have called, what's in the way becomes the way. So things that are blocking our ability to kind of validate that choice or hit those goals allows us to understand what we want to build next and why we want to build it. And, I'll say there's a great saying I came across lately is, the world is not waiting for you to build more of the same. And so that's another kind of perspective that we take is, where's our innovation going to come from, right? And so we went out and we actually did a deal. All this talk with Magic the Gathering is kind of, I love it because, I was obviously a big Magic player growing up as well. And Richard Garfield actually designed the card game in our for blockchain brawlers. So when you come and play brawlers, you play a card game, but it's not a trading card game. It's an actual kind of poker variant. So it's really interesting and really innovative. Again, the world's not wanting you to build more of the same. So this is a very different approach, and it's what I love about it. And I'll leave you with this one last little nugget from Richard. I said, well, we wanted brawlers to be a CCG. He goes, don't ever call it a CCG. I'm like, well, why not? He goes, because the point of Magic isn't to collect cards as a collector. It's a trading card game. We want you to trade, actually. We want you to exchange with the community and marketplaces and hobby shops and friends and people who don't play and all these things. And so he very much took me to task. And it's funny because, I was such a huge fanboy when I met Rich. I'm like, oh, my God, let me tell you about my deck. He's like, okay, everybody wants to. And after I got over that, 3 minutes of being a sycophant, we got down to business. He's a brilliant, brilliant designer, a prince of a guy. But he very much said, look, it's TCG, not CCG, if you want to talk about Magic and the things that kind of inspire me, because we thought collecting was actually bad for the economy, but trading was great for the economy. And so think about it as a means for players to trade things that they need in the meta and to their play style. And that was actually a really interesting point. So that's my takeaway.
Garfield gave a great talk at GDC a couple of decades back about sort of the turning point with Wizards, where they were like, yeah, we could be a CCG, and they intentionally crafted their economy to move away from that to a trading card game.
Well, what was really interesting, so there's a guy who works with Richard who was in charge of kind of product balance and design, and there was one card that got really powerful that was, I want to say it was a rare, and so what they did is they intentionally, and people were hoarding it and selling it and pricing people out of the market and pricing them out of the meta. And so they intentionally overprinted that card. They printed 50,000 of those cards at the next run and made it basically in every single, kind of booster pack, and really changed the economy because, again, they thought that the collectability of it and having people actually priced out of the ability to use it and make it part of their decision matrix was not healthy. And so, yeah, you bring up a good point.
That's awesome. That's actually going to tie into one of the everyone questions that we have a little bit later if we have time. So I'm excited to get into that. But moving on to our next everyone question, it's going to be to Adam at Euphorica. So I was wondering, why did Euphorica choose to use a comic focus for its game and for its metaverse? And how do you think comic art and storytelling can actually onboard new people into Web3?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And I think ultimately we need to take a step back before we talk about comics about what makes a great game and how that becomes addictive. And I think it is key that's through the use of storytelling. The games that keep users encapsulated and intrigued are those with really engaging plot and lore. So for us, we have focused on the lore and the narrative around how the planet has come to fruition to take the first step. Because you only have to look at how many games of recently have been turned into films to know that people have become very engrossed in that IP and become very loyal to the IP. And so that's why we feel it needs to be the forefront of everything that we're doing. So at Euphorica, we felt that the comics was a natural first step to making that lore in a visually appealing and a fun way to read for such a wide audience. And there is a clear correlation between the community in the Web2 community and both Web3 who read comics and play games. So we felt that was a natural first step for us. But we do feel like comics is just the first step. There's a lot of other ways of us releasing that IP into the communities, and then also bringing other IPs into our ecosystem and our community to grow all of our communities into an open community. And this is one of the things that we're trying to achieve, and it's definitely the open metaverse as a platform through interoperability of IP and both tech. And I think we have we have a good standing that comics can be a way to really engage people as a first step.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's very similar to the approach that we're taking with building our game, with pushing with the story and the lore first. So, love what you guys are building. Definitely excited to see what you guys are going to continue to do. Next question is to Austin. So, what was it like to reboot gaming IP from the '80s? I believe it was 1987. I think is when the original game came out for a modern audience. And how will the trading card game NFTs actually tie into the actual playable game?
Well, I mean, yes, we started from an 80s cyberpunk IP, but 80s cyberpunk tapped into a ton of issues, which are still quite contemporary, if not amped up from what they were in the 80s. Fears about artificial intelligence, right? The pervasiveness of the online world, billionaires and corporations competing with nation states for power, the chaos introduced by climate change. I mean, this is what cyberpunk was created to tell stories about, and I don't have to tell you how relevant all of that is to the present day. So it allowed us to make Metropolis kind of an, as I said, an amped up version of the present day. Everything we're right about now, but cranked up, and we make everything dark, we make everything funny. I think it gives us a way of engaging with the issues we're going through right now in a way that it's harder to do with standard high fantasy, although of course you could. So I mean, honestly, like the 80s, it updated itself really because its look at the future turned out to be really prescient. And then how we use the trading cards, like people have been saying, we're a very narrative forward IP too, because the story a game tells gives it that richness and allows people a way into it, right? The trading cards, every trading card is a character, every trading card is an element of the world, right? And you buy it, and then you own a place in the narrative world that we have. And of course, we're a trading card game, and everything operates in gameplay, and everything has its sort of unique set of abilities, which express the character that we've made them into. And then you know what, you own that card, the game grows, the story world grows, and the meaning of that card kind of deepens. It's like if you bought the Batman card in the 1930s, it has accumulated so much more meaning since then, because the character has gone through so many adventures and versions, and now it's a character that feels very, very deep and three-dimensional. So that's our vision for how the cards operate. And now that we open it into a multiverse, the cards will interoperate with other IPs. You get all that weird tension and storytelling friction that comes when different IPs are allowed to occupy the same space.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thanks, Austin. And then our last individual question is to Nick. So we recently released Alpha Phase 3 of the game. I was wondering if you could tell everyone a little bit about who has access and what's coming, and what to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited about this release. We've been kind of building up to it for the last 3 months. It is one of our most complete testnet releases. We've updated a ton of stuff about the game, really focused on certain optimizations, but also added a ton of new content. So now we really have our core gameplay loop finally in the game, and we're going to be focused probably the next couple months on really optimizing the game further, and really trying to work towards a mainnet release. So the game's currently on the Go Early test net, but we are we'll actually probably announce tomorrow the exact prize, but you're going to be able to, you currently can play the game for free if you have either one of our avatars from our avatars collection or one of the collectibles from our collectibles collection, which includes our Quid collection. So for those of you who aren't familiar, you can kind of search, we could drop a link, but search Satoshiverse collectibles on OpenSea. There's over 100,000 of them, and the cheapest ones are like $1 or $2. So really low barrier to entry right now for testing. Eventually, the game will be free to play, but we're trying to intentionally kind of keep it a smaller group while we're testing, because we really want to be able to take community feedback that we receive and kind of fold that into some of our design and development decisions. So if you're new to the project, if you're new to the game, jump into the Discord and we will make sure to get you set up. Right now, we don't want any of those barriers to entry to prevent you guys from jumping in. But what we have coming, so in the next couple months, we have a couple major partnership initiatives that we're working on leading into our mainnet launch. We're going to be working with communities, probably 40 to 50 communities, to do a big kind of collaboration release. So we'll have a lot more details on that in the coming months. But really, moving very fast towards our launch of the game itself. But for those of you who want to, experience a blockchain game that's in a pretty far along state, it's a PC game built in Unreal Engine, so you will need, a decent gaming rig to play it. We always say, if you can play God of War, if you can play The Witcher, you shouldn't have any problems with our game, although we're still optimizing it. But yeah, if you want to try out the game, we think it's going to be a really unique addition to the space. We're seeing a lot of really great games coming out. We've been going to a lot of these conventions and talking to other games and working on partnerships. So I'm excited about this space generally, but we think this is going to be a candidate to be one of the good ones. So definitely hope that anyone who's interested in more of a third person action RPG roguelike, with kind of a mix of various different fields, we'll give it a try, and please do jump into the Discord and tag us, and we'll make sure to get you set up.
Great, thank you for the update, man. So now we're going to move on to our next question for everyone. So maybe Mike, you can start us off with this, because this is kind of related to what you were talking about with Magic the Gathering earlier, and then everyone else feel free to just jump in. But how do we overcome some of the financial exclusivity in the Web3 space to make games and platforms accessible and affordable to everyone worldwide?
Yeah, that's really the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? So I've thought a lot about this, because again, I think cracking the code on what that economic model wants to be, the balance between kind of player, developer, or publisher, is really, really important. And I think that, if you look back at kind of 2010, 11, and 12, the free-to-play model, big publishers didn't opt in right away because they didn't get it. They thought it was a fool's errand. And the companies that grew out of free-to-play that didn't exist before free-to-play were, Supercell and Scopely and Zynga and, King and all these massive, now $100+ billion companies. So that's going to happen in Web3, but the model's a lot harder to kind of tease apart. I think the early experience of kind of Axie Infinity and some other games that sort of showed this massive financial potential were, I think they were fairly dangerous, right? It was, certainly a fair amount of money was made by a few people, but a lot of money was lost by even more people, and that balance wasn't healthy, and it gave the kind of the movement a bad name. I think the thing that has to happen, though, is that there has to be a real division between what the publisher sells and what the players can sell or can craft or can own. And I don't think that every item should be sold by every player all the time with no kind of, evaporation of the assets. Like we had durability in blockchain brawlers, like when we had the mining phase, like things broke and they wore out and you needed to replenish them. And players shifted their economic thinking, like, okay, well, what can I, make if I have this, and what can I do? And that was kind of always the constant calculation. And what we found was we created, as a lot of games did, this optimized race to the bottom, because profit or making money was at the core of what everybody did. And that's a really kind of, I think what we're finding is that's a really unhealthy place to be. But what's not unhealthy is allowing players the ability to sell, trade, craft, or give away, or grab something that has incredible exclusivity, incredible rarity, which is kind of the chase of, oh, I got this elite skin. There's only one out of a million drop, and I got it, and it's worth $100,000. And that can be a reason to play, and that can have an economic angle to it. But the chase for profitability or making money can't be the sole focus. It has, we always say that earning is a result, is not a goal. And I think what the big publishers will find out, and some developer will crack the code on this in the Web3 space, of that I'm positive, but allowing players to buy, sell, and own certain numbers of things that are tied to a scarcity, tied to heightened utility, tied to an equilibrium in an economic model, will bring more players into play and therefore lower the cost of acquisition. The problem that traditional game publishers have is, like, if you look at a kind of a male PvP style game on mobile, let's just say, the cost of acquisition is $20 to $25 per player. And there's not a ton of them, and everybody's fighting for that cohort. And so what they have to say is, okay, the LTV has to exceed, $25 for us to buy these players profitably. And for a free-to-play game, that's really hard to do. Now imagine that you're now going out into Web3 and you're saying, okay, there's actually fewer male PvP players. The LTV has to be higher because there's fewer of them and more people are fighting for them. Like, there has to be a way to lower that barrier to entry for developers and publishers in the Web3 space to go out and really aggressively kind of unlock that current hardcore gaming audience. And I think ownership and utility and scarcity, with the ability to sell what you own, even at a fraction of what you paid for it, is a massive win. I got into a really interesting conversation in my Discord community a few months back. They said nobody's going to come play any of these games if they can't make profit off of it. Like, there's just this real kind of myopic belief that that's an unassailable truth. And I said, look, $200 billion was spent in video games last year, and those players owned nothing. So even getting 10% back, 15% back, 20% back, having your gaming subsidized, the psychological impact of that is so, like, powerful. Like, now when I spend, I'm like, okay, I've got a fiat off ramp. I don't know if I'm going to get all my money back. I don't know if I'm going to profit from it. I don't know if I'm going to get half my money back, but I've got a way out. So that makes me much more comfortable, not only to come in and download and install and play, but to spend and then to recommend to friends. What happened to me was I play a lot of games for a long period of time, but it got to the point on World of Warcraft, I was so pregnant with my expenses up until that point. I said, I can't quit now. I've spent too much. And that's a terrible position for a player to be in. And it's a terrible position for a developer to be in, because, like, you're retaining people through guilt, which is never a way to retain an audience. And so just having that psychological, I could leave if I wanted to and get something back, is a huge, huge, huge win and a great starting position. And once people realize that and they build around that, like, that's a great place to be. And yeah, if something drops for you and it's rare and you make a profit, great. But right now, all the world of gamers have no way to get anything back from what they paid for, which is a really sad state of affairs. And that's what I love about Web3 gaming. And so, but you asked a great question. I think the answer is, it's going to be a balance between a greater rev share, ironically with the strike of the Screen Actors Guild and the writers, like, it's going to be a greater balance between kind of content creators and content owners. And I don't know what that balance is, but every day we try to interrogate that problem, and somebody's going to get it right. They're going to set the paradigm and the rest of the world will follow, and then Web3 will be just a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, it's interesting, right, Mike? Because I've thought about this a little bit, I guess a lot of it myself as well. And one of the things that I keep going back to is we had this world where it was a very one-way street, right? The game developer sold the asset, and the person who purchased it really didn't have any exit opportunities. Right. And so theoretically, I mean, there has to be a different model that continues to allow the game developers to make tons of money on these games, right? Because they're investors, and they're going to do their thing if it's going to become mainstream. And that's why I always kind of hearken back to, this has to be a consumer-led movement, and it really has to be more of a consumers are demanding this technology until there really is a truly viable business model for developers to use to make the type of money that they're making in blockchain gaming. And I think as independent studios, we have a ton more flexibility there. But, you know,
Right.
as Riot Games is pitching a Web3 game to their board, I think it starts to become a little bit of a different conversation, right? So when we're thinking about that, you know, I start to think kind of to the point you were making, there's this kind of trade-off, right, between I think the knowledge that you're never going to be getting that money back and kind of what you're willing to pay for something when you know you're never going to be getting that money back. And then there's kind of the other side of the coin, which is, okay, well, we've seen kind of what has been happening in the extremes, right? You've got NFT projects with 10,000 that give you access to a game, but they're selling for $500, $600, $700, right?
Yeah.
And unless you create, you know, something far beyond, you know, just access and things within the game, I don't think those assets are ever going to be able to be resold for that value in an efficient market, right? So I think like what you said, it hits the nail on the head, is that there has to be some kind of maybe some increase in value and then a revenue split, because the $1 for a skin may turn into $4 for that skin if the developer knows, well, now there's not just a primary market, but there's a secondary market. So a lot of these purchases aren't going to come from us. They're going to come on the secondary market. But if the developer charges a couple bucks more, maybe that's where the revenue split starts to happen, because people value things that they own and have property rights in more than they would, you know, something that they know is going to get thrown away. I think FIFA was a good example of just like people spend a ton of money knowing that the very next season the game is going to, like, basically the same game is going to be released and they're going to have to start over. And I think that, you know, it's a little bit baffling, because I came into this space on the gamer side and really excited about the possibilities and kind of moved more to investor and then developer. And I think, you know, it'll be interesting to see what bigger studios do with what I consider to be an opportunity, but I'm a little skeptical about, you know, how that all plays out for purely profit motivated companies. And, you know, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, because I
do, and I apologize because I feel like I'm hogging all the airways. I'm going to give you kind of three really interesting things to be mindful of. I was speaking to a massive IP holder from a massive publisher today. Said you should really have NFTs in your game because it's kind of custom made to do that. She goes, I don't want to wreck my business model. I can do my existing job and make 8% kind of profit next year, and I don't have to worry about losing my job and losing my cushy role. That's one. So fear keeps people on the sidelines. So we've seen that time and time again. Two, you know, FIFA makes, you know, 4x their revenue of their kind of their content sales through FIFA Ultimate Team, right, through the foot packs. And so that's very much a Web3 sort of thing, and you can see a path there for them. But more importantly is that the number one challenge that kind of free-to-play publishers and developers always have is only 1% of my audience pays. If I could even get 0.5% more, like that is such a massive financial windfall for us. And this is a path to get that 0.5% more or 1% more or 1.5% more. They can unlock so much more revenue if they get players a way out. And because players will be, look, 1% of your audience is going to monetize, and they know that, but there's no reason why it can't be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% of your audience monetizes. And then that changes everything. And so nobody's done the math on kind of how that scales and what that looks like, but somebody's going to figure it out. It's going to be like, oh, of course, that's so obvious. And, you know, I wish I would have been the one who came up with that.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Austin and Adam, what do you guys think about this?
Yeah, I really agree with what Mike's been saying. He's made some really valid points. I think it's very hard to monetize the free to play. But we've come at this with an angle of trying to engage the players more on the rewards mechanism. So we've come up with the kind of concept of engage and earn, in that if you become truly skillful at the game that we've created, you have an earning opportunity. And there's no way for you to pay to kind of get to the top of those, to that game. So it is truly for those players who can play the game. And that opens up a lot of opportunities for those who don't have the financial ability to pay their way to the top, like you've been talking about with FIFA, etc. But then I guess on the accessible side and affordable side, we've also taken the angle and looked at how do those people with lower base specifications get access to a free-to-play model as well. And this is one of the reasons that we looked at building the game engine from the ground up. we can use the compute power that's not been utilized by the computer to lower the base specifications, and that gives us opportunities to be a much more inclusive solution for a global audience as well. So I guess there's two angles there. One is, how do you entice people in, and how do you entice as many people as possible in with as little compute power.
Yeah, so I just have a question for the group, which is the word NFT permanently contaminated, right? Is it going to be a turnoff in 99% of conversations?
Yeah, we never talk about NFTs anymore. We talk about digital assets.
Yeah.
I mean, they are NFTs at their core, obviously, but we very much intentionally avoid kind of FI or blockchain specific language as we go out, because we really are hunting for mass market adoption.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because I think there is a huge, it's tricky, right? Because the entire industry needs to move in order for this to be a thing. And I truly believe it won't move if consumers don't want it. I think that it's such a consumer-led movement, but it has to move, right? Because forget gaming, like think about the metaverse, digital experiences. So I think it's a really tough spot that we're in, because I do think NFT has become a bit of a poison term. But I do think it is extremely important that we communicate the value proposition of NFTs, right? Because again, we need to create the incentives for consumers to want this and to demand this, because it's not going to be necessarily an easy path. And I guess so my background prior to getting in the space in 2017 was as a lawyer in the entertainment industry. And so I was very focused on digital property rights and entertainment litigation from an IP perspective. And this, to me, NFTs, generally the tech behind it, was a paradigm shift in real legal ownership structure, right? Tangibilization of digital assets. But the cases, the regulations, all the things that need to happen in order for I own this to actually mean I own it is different than us saying, because it's an NFT, you own it. Because the reality is, if there's not a court that can, say you own that because it's an NFT and it's separate from the IP, and it's not just a license, it's not just a smart contract that you entered into, with the consumer. It's more than that. There is a tangible element to it, separate from the media itself. Then everything we're talking about is a great theory, but it's not legally enforceable, right? And so that hasn't happened on an international scale yet. We've seen some courts starting to understand what a non-fungible token is, starting to understand what blockchain-backed digital assets are, and making decisions based on this, difference between a digital asset that's purely a license and these more tangible blockchain-backed digital assets. So it's, I guess, kind of looping back to your question, it's going to be very important that the stakeholders, whatever the case is, understand why these assets are different. I'm not sure that we need to use the term NFT, because I do think, unfortunately, that has become a tainted term, largely due to, more of these PFP collections and all of the kind of rhetoric around them. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think it's going to be much, much more of an uphill battle if this isn't a consumer-led movement. I think we're going to have a harder time, as Mike was kind of alluding to, convincing execs at major gaming companies that this is a model they should jump to, without their consumers demanding. In fact, with their consumers basically saying, no, we hate this thing, we don't want it, right? We have to convince them that they do want it, and the consumers that they do want it as well. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a much harder path for us to make it happen, with all the consumer protection stuff going on, currently, and the rhetoric around crypto more generally. So I guess that's just kind of my very isolated lawyer opinion on it, but I think there's a lot more to the story.
Awesome. So I think now's a good time to announce the winners of our giveaway. So the first one, the first prize is going to be a Satoshiverse NFT trading card, which is going to be the Satoshiverse in the Big Apple Gold card. And the winner from that is Tommy from Wax at wax_Tommy_IO. Congratulations, Tommy. Send us a DM and we'll make sure to get you that prize. And then the next prize is a Blockchain Brawlers starter pack, which gives you everything you need to start playing the Blockchain Brawlers game. And that is going to dap24.bnb or at Zine91mm. Congratulations. And then the final one is from Euphorica. It's going to be the Euphorica Origins digital comic that they're going to be releasing, I believe, later this month. And that one goes to Mert Aiden or at Crypto C McCandis. I don't know if I spelled that right or pronounced that right, but congratulations to all of our winners. We'll make sure that we get you your prizes. So we're coming up towards the end of the space here. Nick, do you want to try to fit one more in here, or should we close out?
I want to give everybody a chance because I know we didn't say it at the beginning. If there's anything that you guys have coming up or something you want to mention, feel free to pin the tweet here at the top and then let us know a little bit about it. I want to make sure that everyone has kind of a chance to close and say a few things. So why don't we skip the last question and just open it up to everyone to kind of give some final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up and we'll do it again next week. So I guess if anyone wants to close, maybe anyone just jump up and
Sure.
say if you have anything else. But yeah, and then we'll close it off.
Sure, I'll take a moment. So we're quite excited that we're just about to launch our first issue of the 3-part comic book. So currently, if you take a look at our Twitter, we have some allow list campaigns that are currently ongoing. We've managed some partnerships with Yeehaw Games, GameFi, and most recently Polygon as well. So there's limited editions with each of those partnerships up for grabs. We haven't yet announced the mint date, but it will be within the next couple of weeks. But yeah, very excited to launch this. And it's been something that's been in the works for quite a while. So I think all of us at Euphorica are very excited to get this out to the public.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely. Let's all check that out. Another little thing before everyone else closes, just please do make sure to follow and check out the projects of the speakers who are taking their time. We certainly appreciate them being here, and it helps, everybody come every week to kind of check out their projects and see what they're doing. So thank you for that, Adam. And Mike and Austin, anything you want to close with?
Well, for Metropolis, come play Metropolis. We all come up from we're all longtime game developers. We created this gameplay forward. We have a free to play mode. We have free tournaments. Come on by metropolis-origins.com, or we're on Fractal.
Yeah, ironically, I'd also like to promote Metropolis Origins. I've been a fan of Austin's work for a long time, having played System Shock way back in the day and System Shock 2. And, I know their development team and their designers. They're building a really great and beautiful product worth engaging in. I'll say the same for Blockchain Brawlers. It is a great to-play game. It is a good use of your time. There are weekly tournaments where people can win money. There are monthly tournaments where you can win a whole bunch of money if that is your motivation. But if you just want to play something that's really fun, kind of day-to-day, come in. We think we have the best community in the world in all of Discord. And, we'd love to have you kind of take part and play what we've put forth. We're very, very proud of what we've built.
I love it. Well, thank you all so much again for joining. Thank you for everyone who was here live and everyone who will be checking it out on the recorded version. But this is where we will sign off. So thanks again, everyone. We'll be back next week at the same time. So see you then. And thanks again. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers,
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.